I lived in Oakland all my life.
What's up?
And I seen like every year there's so many murders and black on black killings. I want to know like how can we stop that?
But that's an excellent question. I mean, part of the problem is what I was saying in my speech, and I should have touched on it more, so I'm glad you brought that up. You know, what I say to heads, I'm going to give you an example. In New York, the violence is so bad now, we actually have some folks like Erica Ford, who has this movement called Peace is a Lifestyle. We just had a conference that we did with her back in June. They're actually going into the local prison, Rikers Island, to catch brothers even before they get out of jail to talk about this issue. On a real simple level, y'all, you don't own that block, he don't own that block. You don't own these projects, he don't own that project. You fight over colors, you fight over beefs. It's all self-hatred. It's all self-hatred. And I'm not saying that we got to come up to heads like, yo, do you realize you're practicing self-hatred? No, that's not the approach you necessarily want to take. But we need to understand where it's coming from. And some of the intervention work that we've done, we've sat down in New York with gang members and said, okay, you know, after, as Lasan talked about with me privately, after you establish that trust, because no one's going to listen to you if they don't trust you, number one, what is it that y'all really want? And heads start opening it up. You know what? I need to get my high school diploma. I need a GED. I want to get a trade. I might want to go to Merritt College. You know, I want to go to school. What can I do? You know? And so, but part of the problem is that violence, what did Dr. King say? Yo, violence is the language of the unheard, or riot is the language of the unheard. And so people are acting out. When I was growing up, I was mad violent because I just was frustrated with my situation and I didn't have the words to articulate what I was feeling, so you become a walking time bomb. And then if you drop guns into our communities, I don't know where they came from. If you drop drugs into our communities, I have no idea where they came from either. It just kind of came easily usable, then you start destroying each other. You know what I'm saying? And so to me, we've got to come in with that understanding of the situation, but also we got to come in with some practical solutions. Ras Baraka, the son of the late Merritt College, is now the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. When he was a city councilman, he did the same thing. He created a gang truce in Newark, but he came with a GED program. He came with some job training programs for the young men out there. And it ain't just young men, y'all, it's young ladies too. It's wild all over the place. But when people are violent, in my opinion, and I'm speaking as someone who came from this background, it's oftentimes, we're in deep pain, man. We're traumatized, and a lot of times all we hear in our communities is people cursing each other out and fighting and all kinds of stuff. Guess what? Most of us will end up getting sucked into that in some way. If I'm lying, y'all, seriously, a lot of our families are really deeply traumatized by the things that we've experienced in this country. You know what I'm saying? And don't even know it, as the gentleman said. You know, when I saw that video of Ray Rice punching out his fiance, now his wife, and the way he just looked at her when she was out cold, I said, this has become normal behavior. There's something wrong with that. You know what I mean? And I know some of us have a problem with, you know, the holding around beating of our children. Let me put it to you like this. If you teach someone that the only solution for conflict is violence, more than likely they're going to pass that violence on to somebody else, in my humble opinion. And some of us in the black community say, well, Kev, you're saying we should do what white people do. No, let's stop talking like that. No, I'm saying that we are geniuses, and so we need to dig deeper into ourselves and figure out some other ways that we can rear children where there's respect for their parent or parents, but it's also not this whole issue of fear. George Jackson, since we're here at Merritt College, I read a book years ago called Soledad Brother. George Jackson, who was in prison and was connected to the Black Panther Party. He talked about how we should not have children living in fear of their parents, but they should feel some sort of shame, which would actually lead them to correct the mistake that they made themselves. George Jackson, look him up, Soledad Brother. Back here. And I'm here to stay as long as possible, whatever we need. Y'all all right? Yeah. All right.
First of all, thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
What I'm noticing in your presentation is that there is an emphasis on the fact that misinformation is being perpetuated on the institutional level, through music, through the media, through our government, through our very educational systems. Now, it is our individual responsibilities to get educated, but critical thinking is something that, in large part, is taught in our educational system. How do we as a community come together to change those very institutions so that we can educate our children properly and we can change some of the laws that are biased towards our community?
Are you a professor here? No? Are you an educator at all?
Not yet.
Okay. Do you belong to any organization? Where are you from? What city do you live in, sir?
I'm originally from Detroit, but
okay.
I now live in Oakland.
Okay. Do you belong in an organization in Oakland at all?
Yes.
Okay. Do they do what you're talking about we should be doing around critical thinking? Like, do you bring people together once a month, every couple months, and have these kind of conversations?
Most of the time, because I'm also involved in gay and lesbian organizations.
Okay.
That quite honestly has been my focus. And so a lot of what we do is we create a speakers bureau to go out to schools, to go out to churches in order to educate them about some of those issues.
Okay.
Our concerns are also with the African American community and how we can come together to address some of our issues institutionally. Well,
let me say this in response, and I respect your honesty. I don't care if it's racism or sexism, classism, homophobia, disrespect for the disabled, because you always forget the disabled community. We have to see the intersections of these different forms of oppression and different discrimination. And so to me, it's not an either or, because as you know, you may be a black gay man, but police gonna stop you anyway just because you're a black man. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that we have to put ourselves in these different spaces and make sure that these conversations are happening around critical thinking. Some of it will happen inside of institutions like this, but some of it needs to happen in our communities as well. Black Panther Party said, you know what, we need to create this ourselves. And so I think that we have to do that. And you got Brother Lasana here, who's a community-minded person. I don't know, do you know this brother?
No, sir.
But now we know each other. And I think it behooves us to connect with folks who are like-minded here and say, how can we do this work in the Bay Area, you know? But I think it has to be both. It's not an either or, institutionally, but also in the community level. Because don't we want community empowerment at the end of the day? Yes. You know, because even if the institutions are failing us, we need to empower ourselves. You know, so that's what I would say. Yes.
So what I'm going to do is, he's not leaving. I'm going to have Dr. Trotter come up and give her concluding remarks because she made sure, just as important to make sure this event takes place. So let's give it up to Dr. Trotter. And then we'll continue with the discussion in the book signing. Dr. Audrey Trotter.
Good afternoon. I want to, let's give a hand for Mr. Powell because Mr. Powell's remarks touched me in several ways. I brought a book today as my closing remarks, ironically enough, called The Color of Culture. And I'm going to close because he writes poetry. But I want to challenge all of you students today, whatever extra credit assignment you have, make sure you read an extra article and comment on that with your faculty member in your class. I'd also encourage all of you to do some more research on the background of Mr. Powell. He's a very interesting man. We're very privileged to have had you to speak to our faculty, our staff, and our students this afternoon. And we have a guest here from the district, from other sister colleges in our district here as well. The other thing is, when you talked about the NIGGA, I think when you think about culture and how to engage the millennials, how does a person from my generation engage students in the classroom from your generation, we have to connect. And let me tell you something, when I think about the NIGGA word, to this day, I remember the time I was called a nigger on the playground in the 5th grade. I remember, that's in my core. So I think it's important that we watch our language. I also want to say that I want to thank Mr. Lasana Hotep for his connection in bringing Mr. Powell here. And I want you to spread the link, I want you to spread the message that you heard today across the campus. And I want to encourage what we call our underrepresented students here at the college. There'll be a new program starting up here to serve your needs called the Student Empowerment Program. Look for future information on that. I'm going to close with the Color of Culture poem by Mona Lake Jones. Culture. Everybody has culture, even though some folks think they don't. Culture is ever present. It greets you when you and the sun first wake up in the morning, and it rests with you when you get comfortable enough to fall asleep and say the day is over. Culture is how you love and who you choose to love. It's whether you eat cornbread or pumpernickel. It's how you respond to the dilemmas life offers and how you celebrate living. It shows itself without you knowing and tells who you are without you speaking. Culture includes all your family, even those who are dead and gone, because they are the ones who set the cultural patterns you follow. Culture is often vibrant and loud, or sometimes quiet and subtle, but you know it when you see it, because it has color. Mona Lake Jones, thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Powell.
Also, on behalf of Merritt College, we have some items, so you can go back to New York representing the Bay, the East Bay, the right way.
I want an Oakland t-shirt.
We got the water bottle. You need the water bottle. Kevin's preparing to run a marathon for some reason. He decided he's gonna run a marathon.
I'm running the half marathon. Where's Big Sur at? I'm running the half marathon on Big Sur on Saturday.
He's running a half marathon this Saturday. That's what he do with his downtime.
I want an Oakland t-shirt.
And we got the hat. So let's give it up for Kevin. So we're gonna keep the conversation going. And my team is gonna be getting ready to prepare to serve the food. But I have at least 2 or 3 questions. I had one here, but I know I had a gentleman who was standing right here. I don't know. That gentleman is first. Then the wonderful woman right here. Then I'll go to the front.
And I'll stay here until the last person has a question. So I'm here for, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it humbly. Thank you.
You're going to stay here because I said you ain't got to stop. We got to have you sign some books.
Okay.
And there's too many books left over there. Y'all need to buy some of the books.
Appreciate it. Yes,
Hey,
sir.
Mr. Powell.
Just Kevin. Just Kevin.
Kevin? All right.
Yep.
First of all, I want to say I've admired you for quite some time.
Thank you.
First time I saw you was on BET back in the 90s. And you, Cortland, Malloy, Ed Gordon, I admired all of you all.
Thank you.
Because I love what you said and the way you said it, all 3 of you all. But I have a question for you. What do you think is the answer to situations like Ferguson, Missouri? That's basically what I wanted to ask you. What's the answer to that so that it doesn't happen again?
We have to organize. I mean, I'm not saying anything the elders didn't teach me when I was coming up as a young activist. We have to organize. And this is not glamorous. Once the cameras are going from Ferguson or Trayvon Martin or Oscar Grant, who are the people that are actually committed to making real change happen on this planet? Oftentimes it'll be a handful of people. I'll give you an example. Last year when the Trayvon Martin verdict came down, remember how we all came out in different parts of the country? New York, we had a march, probably 10,000 people. We took over Times Square, and some folks was just angry. They're like, let's keep marching to Harlem. So we said, okay, we're going to keep marching to Harlem. We got to Harlem and said, let's keep going to the Bronx. And some folks kept going to the Bronx. Now, I want to put this in context. We started at 12 o'clock that day. By the time they got to the Bronx, it was 1 a.m. in the morning. Then we said, okay, we need to have follow-up meetings so we can organize. Guess what? Most of the folks never showed up for those follow-up meetings. And then most of the folks who showed up, as I said in my speech, were women. That's part of the problem right there. People are to understand that this is not some sort of sprint. This is actually, to use the word, a marathon, and we got to be committed to this. This is about our life. When we talk about values, do you really believe that you are on this planet? Alice Walker, who's lived in this area for some time, what is the rent, the debt that you're paying for taking up space on this earth? It should be to give back to whatever community that you're part of. And how do you give back? You got to organize. You got to do something. That's why I asked the brother back there from Detroit, what do you belong to? And he said, I belong to an LGBTQ organization. So am I right? You are organizing. Am I right? And that's what I'm talking about. So what are you doing? I say this to black men out there. If you don't mentor a younger black male, that's part of the problem. You know what I mean? On a consistent basis. There's so many organizations that me and Losana belong to a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. I said to fraternity brothers out there, if you in a fraternity and y'all talk all this stuff about community, but y'all ain't actually organizing the community, you are part of the problem. You know what I mean? I'm just saying show up. Like, folks like myself and Losana, and this is not to brag, we humble cats. But I know he's tired, I'm tired. It seems like we mentor so many young people in our communities where we live that all over the country, because a lot of times, a lot of younger brothers say, I don't have anybody else to call. Am I right, Losana? And so just make yourself accessible. If you live in the Bay Area, do what I do. I call a local school in New York every week or at least once a month and say, can I come to your school just to speak? Why is that important? When I grew up, I had no black male teachers. Not one. I had coaches. That was it. And imagine some of these young kids, young brothers see a black male walking through the doors and want, I don't care if you're a janitor, a plumber, because what did Dr. King say? There's dignity in every job. You work, you know what I'm saying? But just for them to see you could make it have such an impact. So that's a way of organizing, just showing up in your community on a regular basis. And you don't have to have children of your own, because I think, Dr. Trotter alluded to it, these are all our children. I don't have any biological children, but I see anyone younger than me, young enough to be my child, like I got a responsibility here. And so let's show up and let's organize, and let's not continue to see the women in our communities doing so much of the work. And I don't mean to come down hard on brothers, but this should not be acceptable. You know what I mean? This should not be acceptable to us that we only show up for certain days. It shouldn't be acceptable that we have to have food at this program to encourage people to come to the program. You know what I mean? It's like we have to kind of put bait out there. We should want to come because it's in our value system and our core that we have a community gathering. We have Dr. Trotter and Brother Hotep and Brother Steele, these folks putting this together. And I know for a fact that educators don't make a lot of money, so they're doing this because they love us. They believe in us. And so the least we could do is show up. You know what I'm saying? And I know actors don't make no money because I ain't got no benefits.
I'm Mr. Powell. My name is
Kevin. I'm just Kevin.
Oh, okay.
Appreciate it, though.
They have an organization here, which is the BSU.
Yes, ma'am.
They have some officers in line, but they are not approachable. I've tried.
You just said that publicly.
Right. Yes, because you have to be approachable. So what I've done is I went out and invited different people to come to the meeting, which is tomorrow, Wednesday at 1, between 1 and 2, in room R124 of the Black Student Union. So because they're not approachable, I don't want to back down or back out from the program. So what I'm doing is trying to show myself friendly and invite people out to come out so that they can have their opinion. But once we do that, how will we go about organizing? Because the person who's the leader may, feel like, well, if I didn't invite him or I didn't say anything, because we have to come together as a unity in order for something to happen. So everyone that's here, I've asked as far as the different clubs, if they can come out and just show their presence to let them know that BSU is not the only club here, that there's other clubs and we can work together to make it happen.
Wow. What's your name?
Anita.
Anita, what's up?
How you doing?
Chilling. That's called shorthand. I love your spirit, but you just put it on blast. You kept it 100. Let me say two things. One, I'm so glad you brought up leadership. In my opinion, a leader, if I can give out my own definition, I think you all should develop your own definition. A leader, number one, she or he, because we're equals, right? She or he changes the direction of the conversation, creates a new vocabulary. If you're a leader, you got to do that on a consistent basis. Change the direction of the conversation, create a new vocabulary. For example, I cringe when someone refers to me as a minority. I'm like, nope, I'm a person of color, I'm an African person, not a minority. Well, why would you say that? I said, well, I understand the word minority came out in the 1960s. It was a term that the government created to identify certain groups of people, but unfortunately that word has come to mean inferiority, and I know I ain't inferior to nobody. Change the direction of the conversation. Another way, don't just call marches and rallies, but as I said to the brother, and we talked back there, you also have to organize, like, what's your plan of action? What are we going to do? Can y'all say action steps? So if you have a leader who only wants to keep calling marches and rallies, but there's no action steps, go find another leader or you become that leader yourself. Number two, if you call yourself a leader, you build organizations, institutions, businesses, or you join ones that actually support the community that you claim to be representing. That's important. Some of us use these institutions, organizations, and businesses as our own personal power base. Ain't got nothing to do with the community. You know what I mean? I saw that in Ferguson, I saw that in Brooklyn, New York all the time. I know y'all don't do that in Oakland, but in other places they do that. You know what I'm saying? You're slide number three. If you say you're a leader, you got to be accessible to who you claim to be representing. My telephone number is 718-399-8149. I give it out all over the country. I got cards. 718-399-8149. Emails Kevin@kevinpowell.net. My Twitter is Kevin_Powell. People are like, do you really respond? Well, who else is going to respond if I don't respond? You know what I'm saying? Because I ain't on no big pedestal. I'm just Kevin. I ain't Mr. Powell. I'm just Kevin. You know what I mean? I just care. And then number four, I think if you're a leader, Audre Lorde said it best, do the work. Just do the work. And then number 5, if you're really a leader, in my opinion, you don't walk around calling yourself a leader. You just don't do it. You just, hey, I'm here to help. You know what I'm saying? But the other part of it, y'all take over the organization. Vote people out of office.
We're going to take 2 questions. We're going to take one from the young lady here and Mike back there. Then we're going to move Kevin over to the table to sign, take pictures, and then you might be able to ask him some one-on-one questions, but we're going to have to break at that point and then serve food, and then it could just become like a community gathering at that point. But 2 questions, one from the sister here and then one from Mike.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Kevin. Hi. My name is Kiona, and sorry, I had to write my question down. So I have 2 sons who are 9 and 7, and my 9-year-old is in the 4th grade and is being taught basically, you know, the half-truths of our country and things like that. And we have conversations all the time. You know, I'm in college, I'm learning, you know, about my history, and when I talk to them, they're still kind of confused, and my question basically is, you know, they're confused only because, you know, they're being taught one thing, and then I'm telling them another, and I want to provide them with more resources, more, you know, books, more websites, more anything that, you know, it's not just mommy telling them this, you know, because they're only learning the half-truth, but I want them to know the whole truth before they get to college or, you know, things like that.
Let me say this. Let me say this. Like, education is deep in this country. I think I went to the so-called best public schools in Jersey City where I was born and raised. My mama fought hard for me to go to quality public schools. In the years K through 12, which is 13 years, right? K through 12 is 13 years. I think Black history might have been 2 pages in total in those 13 years. Latinos, nothing. Asian people, nothing. Native Americans, they were just savages and barbarians who just gave away their land or they was trying to fight over it. Women, y'all were invisible. You feel where I'm going with this? LGBTQ, invisible. You know what I'm saying? Poor people, invisible. And so I think basic text everyone should read is called A People's History of the United States, Howard Zinn. A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Jewish brother who was active in the civil rights movement in the 60s, part of SNCC, Student Online Coordinating Committee, was so affected by what was going on, he decided to dedicate his life to giving a holistic history of all people's contributions. Because if we really are equals, then we should have equal contributions in the curriculum. That's number 1. Number 2, I think that, you know, we do have a responsibility to teach our children everything they need to know about themselves. I don't care what their background is. They should know who they are, where they come from. But I also want to challenge parents out there. You should just not sit there and accept the education that your kids are being given. I have a friend back home named Tracy. She's from Brooklyn. She raised a son by herself. She had her son when she was 19 years old. He's now a grown man doing well. She told her son, go to school and tell the teacher that Columbus did not discover America, that he was in fact the mass genocide perpetrator, and he was a terrorist. And he was like 6 years old. He went to school and said that, and the teacher was like, what? Because his teacher was ignorant. Just because they're teachers don't mean that they know the truth. Because they've been taught in the same school system you were taught in, you know. But what I'm saying is, don't give up your right and power as a parent. You can go to school and say, I don't like the education that you're giving. If you're going to teach English, for example, don't just say the classics are Shakespeare and Chaucer and Keats. What about Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and Pablo Neruda and all these other folks? Do y'all feel where I'm going with this? You know, and you can say to them, hey, this is stuff, and don't ghettoize it to Women's History Month, don't ghettoize it to Black History Month. This should be throughout the curriculum, throughout the school year. You know, because what people try to do is, okay, here's Black History Month, here's Women's History Month, and we're going to tell you a little bit about this, and then we're going to keep it moving like it's not important. Well, it is important. You know what I mean? And so I think that you got to use your power too, and go in there and say no, and maybe organize with other parents at that school. We need to make sure our children are learning about themselves as they're learning how to read and write and do arithmetic. I was a great student, but I realized I was so profoundly self-hating when I got to college, when I discovered the E185 section in the library. That's where all the Black books are, y'all. And I realized I didn't know anything. I knew absolutely nothing. But if you ask me about Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, I could run off stall fast. You know? And there's something wrong with that when you know someone else's history better than you know your own history. You know? She asked me a question that's important to answer. Mass incarceration, prison industrial complex. How many of y'all familiar with the term prison industrial complex? We need to talk about this. And I know I'm in the Bay Area where y'all are super progressive, but this is, in a lot of ways, This is modern day slavery, or what Michelle Alexander calls the new Jim Crow. Do y'all know that book, The New Jim Crow? There's something wrong where this country locks up more people than any other country on the planet. You know, there's something wrong with so many of our people get out of prison and then they go right back into the prison system because there's nothing there for them. There's no real rehabilitation. You know, we need innovative programs. Back to solutions. I have a friend named Dr. Baz Dreisinger in New York. She's at John Jay College. She actually started a program, and y'all can look it up, it's in the New York Times a couple weeks ago, where she goes to a prison upstate New York and works with young people around writing skills, but actually now has them becoming writers. And when they get out of school, she set it up so they can actually go to college and get a college degree. Solution. What's your name? Her name is Dr. Baz, B-A-Z, Dr. Baz Dreisinger.
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry, Dr. Baz, yes, Ms. Jackson. Dr. Baz, B-A-Z. Last name Dreisinger, Dreisinger. Dr. Baz Dreisinger. It's in the New York Times. It's a great program. But we should all be outraged by the mass incarceration of our communities. First the drugs came, then the mass incarceration has exploded. I don't think that's a coincidence. And people say, well, are you a conspiratorial theorist? Well, no more than the so-called founding fathers conspiring to say that all men are created equal, and we know they were lying. Seriously. Yes, sir.
I heard you touch on, during your lecture, a lot of African-American young males usually tend to hop into athletics or the hip-hop generation. And being an athlete here and a young male, I see a lot of brothers come, and that's usually what they, lean towards, whether it's athletics or hip-hop. I wanted to know, what was your motivation to actually go in a different way, into a different field, and actually become the person that you are today?
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I can't sing, I can't rap, so that was off the board a long time ago. But I played baseball for 10, 12 years, and I ran track all 4 years in high school. So as Lasana said, I'm in training for a marathon. I grew up an athlete. I love sports. On my iPhone back there is about 10 different ESPN apps. This is not a game to me. I love sports. But when I was a kid, my mother took me to the library every Saturday, in addition to me doing baseball or karate or other stuff. She kept, from the time I was 3 or 4 years old, she instilled in me, read, which is deep. One of the things I left out, part of being a leader, and leaders are sometimes our mamas and daddies and aunties and uncles and grandparents. My mama, as I said earlier, never went to college, never set foot on a college campus until she dropped me off. But she knew from the time I was 3 or 4 years old, you're going to college. And somehow in her mind, it was connected to this boy needs to read books. That's why I became a writer. I knew from the time I was 11 years old I was going to be a writer because my mama stuck it in me, library. She got a library card and I got a library card. She would let me roam all over the library, and then she would sit there with the local newspaper. She would just read the paper. You know what I mean? But she was giving me an example that this is important. You know what I mean? But I got to be honest with y'all, unfortunately, because how we sometimes are conditioned in our communities, I would keep what I knew to myself because I didn't want to be considered corny in the community because I was so quote-unquote smart. Guess what? Everybody in this room is smart. And there's no shame in being intelligent. You know what I'm saying? Huey Newton was intelligent. You know what I mean? But I just think there's nothing wrong with being a rapper or a ball player or anything like that. I'm just saying think big, but also understand that those things are constantly in our faces. What I've noticed all around the country, young black males aspire to 3 things: ball player, something in the entertainment industry, or a hustler. Why? Because we see that on a regular basis. And here we are sitting under lights, and I'm saying to myself, well, where are the scientists out there who want to be like Louis Latimer, who worked with Thomas Edison as he's creating the electric light? You feel what I'm saying? Here we are in this part of the country, and there's so much incredible talent that's come out of our communities that were not entertainers or athletes. At Stanford University, I'm going to be doing some work for the next 2 weeks. One of my friends just hit me up on Twitter saying my father is a retired professor there. I had no idea. I'm going to sit down because he's an older black man, and I want to soak in all his knowledge. How did you do what you were doing when clearly you probably were only the few folks at Stanford back in the day? And so even if you're an athlete, I'm saying there's nothing wrong with being an athlete, but then your model should be someone like my man Magic Johnson. I win 5 championships with the Lakers, but while I'm there, I'm taking advantage of the fact that Showtime is the most popular thing in the world in the 1980s, and there's a lot of business people coming there, so let me soak up their knowledge about business, and then I become more successful as an entrepreneur after I won those 5 championships and the 1992 gold medal with the U.S. Olympic team. You feel where I'm going with this? He flipped it, he remixed it. Or the other extreme is you could be one of the many athletes, including my favorite athlete, Allen Iverson, you know, because he represented for us little dudes, 5'10", 6 feet tall, mad skinny, you know what I'm saying? We are who we are, you know what I'm saying? But Alan should not be 38 years old and broke. You feel what I'm saying? Because he didn't take that education seriously that Magic Johnson took seriously. You know? LeBron James, I don't care if people love him or hate him, I love LeBron. You know why I love LeBron? He is his own man, and he decided when he put that statement out, I'm going to go back to my community in Ohio or Oakland or New York, wherever I'm from. This is for the community now. My 4 years at the Miami Heat, that was about, you know, that's like my college years, but he was looking at a bigger picture. I'm more than just an athlete. I represent something because here I am, LeBron James. My mama was a teenager when she had me. Basketball saved my life, but it can't just be basketball. This is bigger than basketball. Basketball is just a vehicle to get me somewhere else. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know? And so if you use sports to go somewhere else, or you use hip-hop to go somewhere else, that's one thing. But if you stop there and that becomes, you know, it's like we all become, these ceilings stop us, man. Back to Lasana, we got to have an imagination. Now, my challenge to everyone in this room, you should, every year of your life, for the rest of the time that you're alive, especially students here, you should always add new people to your life every single year who are smart as you or smarter than you. Number one. Number two, you should pick up something new every year, at least one thing every year that you didn't know how to do the year before. Otherwise, you're not going to grow. Am I right, y'all? You're not going to grow. And I was talking about it earlier, y'all got to travel. Where I live in New York City, people in Brooklyn don't want to go to Harlem. People in Harlem want to go to Brooklyn. People in New York don't want to go to Jersey because they think Jersey's whack where I was born. You know what I'm saying? If you've never left the Bay Area, if you've never been to Southern California, if you've never left California, if you've never been east or to the Midwest or down south where some of your ancestors came from, and I'm talking from experience, I didn't get on a plane until I was 24 years old. Think about that for a second. 24. Because I didn't think I could. Because my imagination was limited. Even though I was a smart kid in some ways. And so I'm saying, your imagination's got to be expansive. If you want to do something, you can do anything you want. Since 24 years old, I've been to all of these countries. I said it. I've been to 5 of the 7 continents. You couldn't even, I'm a black boy from the ghetto. I'm like, how did that happen? You know what I mean? Where I come from, but my thing is like, you got to have an imagination, man. And I'm going through the stuff I was talking about up here, brother. You know, I've seen people die, get killed. I've battled alcohol my own self. I've been violent in my lifetime. So I'm not talking to y'all from some abstract theory. These are my own personal experiences, you know what I'm saying? But I'm like, if we can come from all kinds of trauma and pain, why limit yourself to just being Kevin Powell, the writer, or I'm so-and-so the ball player, or so-and-so the rapper? Be everything that you possibly can be, because you don't know if you got another life after this, you know? But as you be everything that you can be, make sure you look at what LeBron said. I'm going back there for the kids, because I represent them, you know what I mean?
Give it up to my man Kevin. So what we're going to do is take about 3 minutes to transition